Welcome back to A Closer Look. I'm Sheila Liaugminas. So glad you're there. If you just tuned in, welcome to the program. As I said at the top of the hour, it's a big news day for a Monday this late in June, heading into the 4th of July weekend. And yet we stay on top of as much of it as we can with the best experts. And as I told you, I would be joined by one of the more honorable members of Congress these days, a man of great integrity who makes himself available to as much media as he can in between his duties here and abroad. He does travel because he's on the Foreign Affairs Committee, and he's a veteran as well. And there are a lot of conflicts going on around the world in Syria. In, of course, Iraq, Afghanistan. He knows these areas well. He served there. And that is Illinois Congressman Adam Kinzinger, who joins me now. He's a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee and an Air Force veteran who served in both Iraq and Afghanistan. His top priorities include strengthening U.S. energy policy, making our nation less reliant on foreign resources. That's a part of national security, both at home and abroad. He's always been a strong supporter of our leadership, U.S. leadership in the Middle East, and continues to focus on eradicating the threat of ISIS and others with a comprehensive and detailed strategy. And I want you to know this, folks. Serving as Deputy Republican Whip, Congressman Kinzinger was named a Republican role model for 2017 by the Washington Post, and we certainly need that. Congressman Kinzinger, thank you so much for being here.
You bet. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for making yourself as available as you do to a varied and a wide array of media, Congressman, because you do. And to every one of them that I've followed, you bring a voice of reason and wisdom to calm down the heated rhetoric left and right and everywhere by politicians and by members of the media. So thank you very much for that.
You bet. Thanks for saying that.
In fact, to that point, you are calling, especially after that shooting on the baseball field, so tragically, so unfortunately, you called for toning down the rhetoric and just simply calming voices. Of course, after Gabby Giffords was shot, President Obama called for the same thing. Congressman, it didn't last more than, it seems to me, a couple of days. Are you feeling it in Washington, that sense of bipartisanship that after that happened, sort of a moment of clarification there?
I wish I could say yeah, but no. To be honest, I mean, it's, you see, I think Bernie Sanders made a comment about, all these people are going to die if Republicans pass their health care plan. Hillary Clinton, frankly, tweeted that we're the death party. And here's the point. It's not that, Hillary Clinton said something about taking up arms or anything. She'd never do that. But when you say something like the Republican Party is the death party, you take somebody who's in a bad mental state that's angry as it is already, and then you start attributing the Republicans being the party of death, which isn't true, of course, but you start attributing that to them, then that's how somebody triggers from being just, a person that's angry in their basement to somebody that's willing to pick up arms. I think both sides have got to be, frankly, very cognizant of this. When President Obama was president, there were a lot of voices on the right that were calling for violence and saying things. We all just need to take a step back, be partisan, that's fine, be passionate, that's fine, believe what you believe, but this is what makes our country great above every other country, is our ability to discuss issues and not turn to arms.
Exactly. And yet it, became what it became. It just remains vitriolic after that shooting on the baseball field. In fact, as we know, and I saw you interviewed about this by some pretty heated members of the media. And, but afterwards, some people, as we know, pointed to the president himself as the source of a lot of vitriolic rhetoric, while on the other side, the Trump family has been speaking out lately about the level of hateful vitriol leveled at them and the president. So you addressed that, and I know you like to repeat, you're an optimistic person. You hold on to optimism, but you like to point out to people, look, we have to fight for what we believe, but our tone has got to change. What more can you do, Congressman, than just set the example?
Well, for me, that's all I can do is try to set the example. I can call out. I believe in the biblical principle of, bringing light to the darkness. And I had on my Facebook, it recently posted a number of the Facebook comments I received after the shooting, one of which said, Representative Kinzinger, I wish you were on second base. One of which said, Abraham Lincoln deserved to die just as every Republican deserves to die. I mean, this is in the dark underworld of Facebook comments and the internet. Wow. This is what's going on. And so I think it's important not to pretend like that doesn't exist, I think it's important to put that out there so that people who just read Facebook posts and not comments see that there is this dark, seedy underworld of people that feel like they can say whatever and take the mask of evil off, and I think that needs to happen. But the other thing too is, look, from the POTUS down to the President of the United States down to a city council member, we have to be cautious of our tone. But people, regular citizens that don't hold a position, also have to be cautious of their tone, because people in elected office typically just reflect what their district or what their constituency wants them to be. So we have to be careful.
To that point, I know you've been asked this a lot, but I asked the different congressmen who come on the program when they go back to their districts and their town halls. Some of them have had worse problems than others with being shouted down or people trying to shout others down and silence them. I know Congressman Fortenberry said last week that he normally would have about 300 people roughly at his town halls. The last one was like 1,500. So what have yours been like?
Well, I usually have about 20 at my town halls, and I've gone up to 300, so I don't know. But, look, town halls are fine. They're good. There's plenty of forums where members of Congress go out and talk to their district and their constituents, and constituents can reach out to members of Congress. Some have tried to make town hall kind of the be-all, end-all, but they're good to do some. But mine have been pretty good. They've been pretty calm. People in central and northern and southern Illinois, where I represent, are good Midwestern folks that know how to treat each other. But there's one thing that happened in that, which I actually called some on the left out for this question. There's a real vitriol against Christianity that I have felt in some of this. I get questions all the time in these town hall meetings about the federal government giving money to churches or any church receiving any version of federal money. And I look at that and I go, 30, 40 miles north of where I live is the south side of Chicago. And in that area, in some areas of that, you're more likely to be shot walking down the street than you are in Afghanistan. And that happens to be an area of the country where the church plays a very important role. African American church is the center of that unit. And so for me, I think the church can play a very important role in solving problems of violence and anger and hate and deceit and everything that exists. So it did amaze me in this to get all those kind of anti-church questions, and it makes me wonder what the real driving force is behind some of those.
Yeah, and a good time to bring that up because of today's Supreme Court ruling on the high-profile case in the Trinity Lutheran Church in Missouri. It's a playground safety issue, and it's seen as by people who are fighting for religious freedom rights in this country, seen as a very big victory for that group. While the Washington Post, and certainly we see it as a big religious freedom victory, Washington Post reports, but it's also seen as a blow to those who want to see a higher wall of separation between church and state. Congressman, you make a very good point. Churches in America are doing a lot of great work in the communities, be they inner city communities that really need those resources and help for children, education, you name it, food, meal programs, you name it. They're doing such good work civically that, and yet we have to continue these battles. And that, as you point out, anti-Christian attitude out there today has grown very strong.
Yeah, and nobody out here, I haven't heard any member of Congress advocate for having a appropriation to give to churches, huge amounts of tax money to keep churches afloat. That happens through the offering. That happens through people making that commitment. But we have to recognize, church does not play a bad role in people's lives. In fact, when people reject religion, which it's their right to do in this country, that takes away any basically view that there's a reason to do what you do, that there's an afterlife, and that leads to a nihilistic viewpoint, which the only thing that matters is what's happening on this earth, which can lead to some pretty bad things. So, we're all for separation of church and state. We are. I believe that, the Pope should not be the head of the U.S. government. But I also believe to sit back and say the church somehow plays a harmful role in the country, to me, is confusing. And I don't understand what's happened over the last, few years to take that level of animosity as public as it has been.
Yeah, that kind of answers the question I was going to ask you. Why do you think that the anti-Christianity has picked up to this point? So, two things. So, Perez, the head of the Democratic National Committee, has made sort of a litmus test of you have to be pro-abortion to be a candidate that they'll back in the Democratic Party. There's no room for pro-lifers. And then Bernie Sanders making a comment about a candidate for office who's Christian and expressing a great deal of concern for that. Christians are informed by the first principles in how to treat people, human dignity, human rights, humanitarian aid, so forth. Why does that threaten people?
I don't know. And you know what's been interesting, what's happening in the Democratic Party, and if you have a Democratic listeners right now, I would suggest that they get very active in their party to drag it back where the Democratic Party always used to be, and that is, look, I think Nancy Pelosi's a liberal, but compared to Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, Nancy Pelosi's a moderate. This party is being drugged so far left. And now you're seeing, protests out on the street where they have very vulgar things going on, and that's almost celebrated. And it's this hedonistic, nihilistic view, which in this country you have a right to have different views. Nobody's arguing differently. But I think to put aside the role of the church and say that, to believe in God, to believe in an afterlife, to believe that your actions on earth have an effect in the afterlife is not a bad thing. I mean, I believe it in my heart and soul, but if somebody didn't believe it, if they didn't believe there's a God, they still have to look at it and say, yeah, but the principles that are being taught by any of these churches is probably pretty good, but for some reason there's an animosity, and people are offended when they see, whether it's a in God we trust on the coin or whether it's a nativity scene, somehow that offends their very core, and I can't think of much besides to say there may be a spiritual aspect to it.
Oh yeah, that's very, very good to point out. I mean, the saying probably remains: there are no atheists in foxholes. Maybe there are, but you would know better than those who aren't veterans. But that's the time when you want to believe that what you do in life matters and that there is a God. But Congressman, speaking of foxholes and battles and so forth, there's so much conflict in the Middle East. And today, to talk about what you introduced today, I like how bipartisan this is, because you co-sponsored it with a member of the Democratic Party, Brendan Boyle. Together today, you announced a congressional caucus for Syria, and you see Syria as the greatest humanitarian crisis of our time, the conflict that's been going on there. Over, you say, since 2011, over 500,000 Syrians have been killed by the Assad regime. What is this congressional caucus for Syria?
Well, it's members of Congress coming together to talk to experts, to have an interest in what's going on in Syria, to understand the implications of what's going on there long term. I think, a lot of the times we sit here in our comfortable houses and watch TV and, have dinner and everything else, and don't realize that there are children, literally young children, that want to be firefighters or cops or teachers, same hopes and dreams as our kids, that are wondering if they're going to take a bomb from a Russian, frankly, or a regime aircraft. And what that does over time, besides just killing people, which is sad enough, besides, ripping people from their homes, which is sad enough, is it'll create a next generation of terrorists, because people without hope and opportunity, the ability to read and education, people that are devoid of that are easy to be recruited into extremist views of Muslim ideology. And so what we need to do is fix the situation in Syria, to deny the next generation of ISIS or Al-Qaeda the ability to recruit these folks. And so this caucus is bringing members of Congress together to talk about this, to figure out how we can help, to work with the administration, and frankly bring a lot of congressional firepower into the fight of solving what I think is really the humanitarian crisis of our time.
And in a word, you think this is solvable, and solvable in the rather near-term future?
It's solvable. I don't know about the near-term future. The longer we wait, we had an opportunity in 2013 with the red line. The longer we wait, the worse it's going to get.
Congressman Adam Kinzinger, thank you so much for coming in and giving us those views. You're on the Foreign Affairs Committee. You're doing a great job, and you're accessible to the people, and that's as important as anything else. Thank you so much.
Anytime. God bless.
You as well. God bless you as well. Folks, pray for our members of Congress. They really need that, and they need to hear from you that they're doing a good job. So give them, let them know we have their backs, and pray for them. We'll be right back after a short break.